What is up, guys? My name is Mark Centerreal. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the RC vlog. Today we're going to do kind of a how-to video. So a lot of you guys out there don't know how to solder. You guys need to learn how to solder. So I needed to make a new connector. I needed to make a new XT90 connector. I just switched to XT90s on my e-buggy because I used to run Deans on everything, and I guess Deans get worn out, and the connection, I guess the connectivity, the contact point and the connectors, maybe they got loose or they weren't connecting as well. And what happens whenever there's not that great of a connection, it gets really hot, and my Deans connectors were getting so hot it was actually blowing the solder joints off my connectors. So near the end of last season, I had two incidents where my car just completely cut out because my solder joints just blew off. I replaced the connector with Deans to finish out the season, but this season I went to XT90s, and the reason why I went to XT90s is the contact area is huge. It's like using gigantic bullets, or it's like using bullets for your battery. So I don't know how long I'm going to be using XT90s. I think I'm going to be switching to bullet style 4S batteries soon. But nonetheless, you guys need to learn how to solder, because a lot of you guys don't know how to solder, and it's pretty sad. So I'm going to make a connector, and by me making a connector, I'll show you guys some tips and tricks, basically some fundamentals in soldering that everyone should know to make sure you have a really good solder joint. So let's get started. So before we actually start soldering, I know a lot of you guys aren't going to want to hear this, but you really have to have a good soldering iron. You can't, I mean, I guess you could solder with one of those Home Depot soldering irons that or those cheap soldering irons. The problem is you can't control the temperature. You don't want your soldering tip too hot, but you don't want it too cold where it can't melt the solder fast enough. So I use this one. I don't even know what the model number is, but it's the I guess you pronounce it Hako or whatever, but it's the RC or the hobby soldering iron. So I have that. The other thing, another tip that you want to make sure you do is when you solder, you need to make sure the tip of your soldering iron is always clean. Always clean. So make sure you're always cleaning it and there's no extra solder on it or dirt or anything on there. So get a good soldering iron before you begin. It's well worth it. I've had this one for, which I don't want to jinx myself, I'm going to knock on wood, but I've had this one for several years now. Hadn't had any problems with it. It heats up super fast. I don't bring it with me to races because it's kind of heavy, but it's an awesome soldering iron. Get you a good soldering iron. Alright, so here we go. So the other thing that really helps is to get a good set of helping hands. So I bought this one. This one I always thought was really cool. I've used it at a hobby shop before. It's called the Jigs Up. I don't even know if they still sell this thing, but there's several companies out there that sell these. They're really cool. They really help a lot. It came with this extra block. So you can see I put a little bit of fuel line around the alligator clips. I did that because some of the smaller wires, if you're crimping it really hard and the wire gets really hot, it will actually melt the insulation, so I put that on there. But before I begin, which I've already kind of begun, here, let me straighten this camera out. There's going to be a lot of out of context that are going to take place in this video, so please try to hold back. There's going to be a lot of talks of tips and things like that. Let's keep this on a mature level, kind of, but not really. Alright, so very first thing that people don't do that's very important is you have to tin the wire. So I use, look, this is Radio Shack solder. That's old school right there. 60-40 solder. So that's what I use, and I try to use these. I think this one is the 0.03 diameter, so the diameter is not really that big. You can get solder. You should be able to get solder at your local hobby shop. You can also get solder on Amazon or online somewhere. But so my tip is super clean. You're gonna tin the tip. That's also a super important part. So there you go. Tip is tinned, and then you're gonna push it up against the wire, and then just let it kind of absorb. So as you can see, I'm not even pushing that hard, and I'm tinning the tip really well. So a lot of times what I used to do, this was a mistake that I used to make, again, I'm cleaning the tip. After I tin the tip, I would assume that it was good, but you actually got to rotate it, because a lot of times tin gets on one side, or the solder gets on one side but not the other. So we're going to solder the other side really well. You're going to find out why it's so important to tin the tip, or tin the wire so much. So now there's a lot of solder on this wire. And that is a good thing. You want that. That's what you want. So this is what it looks like. Can y'all see that? Let's see if the camera's getting that good right there. A lot of solder on the tip of that wire on my XT90 here. This is why this thing's cool. You can put it up like this. So I'm gonna try to do this. It's gonna be kind of hard to do it with you guys watching. Can you guys see that? Let's see if I go directly over it. I'll just do it step by step. Anyways, I'm doing my best, guys. Scroll up just a little bit. Scroll. Sorry, guys. Make some camera adjustments here. Alright. So, we have tinned the wire. Clean the soldering tip. Now we're going to have to put solder on the connector. So where you're going to solder the wire to, you need to put solder there too. So again, I'm going to tin the tip of my soldering iron. What this does is it basically heats up the contact area faster. I'm going to put this on here, and then I'm just going to melt some solder onto the connector. Be generous with the solder. Solder's cheap. So now I got a good amount of solder on my connector. Sorry, it's a big truck driving by. Good amount of solder. I'm gonna put a little bit more. All right, so this is what it looks like. Good amount of solder on the connector. Now all you have to do is, I'm going to clean the tip again. Again, you want a clean tip. Out of context, out of control. Now what you want to do is you want to tin the tip again, soldering tip, and then you just have to push the tinned wire onto the connector, and then all fuses together. Beautiful. I mean, it can't be any better than that. So let me show you guys what I got. Cleaning the tip. That is one of the most important parts, clean the tip. Some people use flux. Flux is something that helps kind of melt the solder on there a little cleaner. Look at how beautiful that solder joint is. I hope you guys can see that. I mean, it is as beautiful as can be. Damn, I'm good. And it's solid. That ain't going anywhere. So, to kind of review what we did, you tin the tip before you solder anything. You tin the wire, and then you put solder on the contact area, the part that you want to solder to your connector. You put solder on your connector, and now that you'll have solder on the connector, solder on the wire. You're going to tin the tip again, just on the soldering iron, and then you're going to push the wire and the connector together with a tin soldering iron, and it will just mold together like so. So there you go. We'll do a... What is going on out there? We'll do a Dean's. A lot of people use Dean's. So... Alright, so after you have the wire soldered to the connector, you put your heat shrink on. Don't forget to put, like, luckily for me, because I'm doing building a connector, this is open, so I can always put heat shrink on here like so. Let's see if I can get this up higher. They're doing a lot of building in my neighborhood, and it's been crazy. Alright, so there we go. So you can use heat shrink. You can use a lighter for heat shrink, but sometimes you can burn it. I am going to use a heat gun. It goes on a lot cleaner. So basically I'm going to hit this thing with the heat gun. Beautiful. Look at that beauty. So you're probably asking yourself, why did I do all that? I finished. It's a good practice, a good habit to finish one side of the connector before you even start on the other side, because if you're soldering a battery and you try to have two exposed wires and they accidentally touch, it goes boom boom. Not boom boom like poo, but boom boom like explosion. So let's get the let's do the other side real quick. Alright, I got the part that goes in the XT90 done. Looks good. Looks like it's professionally done. I'm tooting my own horn over here with my soldering skills. Alright. So, I'm going to do this side. This is going to be a Dean's. I have a lot of Dean's. There was a hobby shop that was closing down a long time ago near my house, and I bought like every Dean's connector they ever had, or all the remaining Dean's connectors. So what I use Dean's for is I use Dean's for my, like the adapters for my chargers. So since I have some XT90 batteries, I have some Traxxas batteries, I have some Dean's batteries. I actually have Dean's on all my charging leads, and then I just use these adapters to charge the batteries. So we're going to do the Dean's side. So I'm basically getting the insulation off. You can use one of those tools that takes the wire off, but I feel like whenever I do it this way, it's a little bit cleaner. The cut's a lot cleaner, and you don't accidentally take some of the wire off. So I use an X-Acto knife to get the wire insulation off. Alright, so now we're going to tin these, which when it's like that, it's not bad. I'm out of solder. I need to get more solder. In regards to wires, I am using, right now, this is 12 gauge wire. Because it's a connector, I don't really care that much about the wire, so I'm using some leftover Tekin wire that I got with one of my old Tekin ESCs. So this is 12 gauge wire. When it comes to charging leads, the wires don't have to be that thick, only because it's just a charging lead. There's not that much current that's going to come out of it. But if it's for like a 4S battery, I would say no smaller than 12 gauge. The wire that I use going to the motor, I actually use 14. So on my 10 scale stuff, 14 is just a lot easier to mess with. Hold on, I gotta get more solder. I'm out of solder. So yeah, use 14. Again, always clean. Before you start soldering anything, you gotta tin the tip. There's gotta be solder on the tip. So yeah, I use 14 gauge wire on the wire that go to my motors. Some might argue that's not big enough, but I've never had a problem with it, especially with 10 scale stuff. Maybe with 8 scale stuff, I'd use something a little bit bigger, but it is what it is. All right, got these tips tinned. You got them to whoa! I'm getting too excited, guys. You got to let it cool down before you put ye old heat shrink on it. So I'm gonna let it cool. And then I'm going to put some heat shrink around the wire. That way whenever I put it on the connector. So now I'm going to do the connector. Basically tinning the connector. Here, putting solder on the connector. This is a Dean's. Done so many Dean's. I feel like Dean's are easier for me. Make sure you are conscious of what side is what. Make sure you do positive to positive and negative to negative. Sorry guys, this is the third time. So I'm doing this the third time. There's no reason why you guys shouldn't remember this. This is cool enough to put the heat shrink on, so I did. Alright, I'm going to solder this together. I won't make y'all wait. I'll show y'all the final product. Alright, so that was RC soldering. So here's my tip. See, I told you. The out of context are getting out of hand that are stuck in my head. Here's my adapter I just built. XT90 to Dean's. So I was a little over ambitious. So see how this Dean's connector, see how those are so close together? In order to make that happen, you have to solder on the inside of the positive side on the Dean's. It's not as easy. When I went for it anyways because I want my stuff to look clean. Most people can just solder on the outside, so it won't look as. It's a little bit easier to solder, and it serves the same purpose. It just looks a little cleaner this way. So, I was telling you guys that I use Deans for everything. So basically when I buy leads, this is Big Leads RC. Big shout out to Jeremy McQuiggan with Big Leads RC. He sent me some of these. These are awesome. I get Deans everything. So I don't ever have to change my charging leads. I just have to change the adapters. So basically because it's Deans, I can plug this in and always use my charging leads. Just make sure I have the adapters. So I can use this lead to charge anything so long I have the correct adapter. So that's why I did it that way. So that's that, guys. So if you like this video, smash that like button. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to my channel, turn on the notification bell, and you guys will see me next time. Later, guys.